creative director for about 20 years before transitioning into this. But anytime anybody would let me draw, I drew in my job. So eventually I was just like, you know what? I'm tired of designing apps and buttons, and I want to actually use my creativity more. So I took a course, and the rest is history.
Nice. And when would you say this was about when you made that transition from designing apps and things like that into children's books?
I've been doing children's books professionally since September 2017 is when I 2017 is when I signed with my agent.
Mm-hmm.
So a couple of years. Is that it? No, 2018. 2018. No, 2017. Okay.
No, I totally get it. The time definitely flies.
I'm like, oh, yeah. It's 2020 already. So it took about a couple of years to fully transition.
That makes sense.
Working every day on my art.
Got you. And you said you took some courses too. What were the courses that you took when you were trying to transition?
I took the Make Art That Sells course on an absolute whim. I just got the ad, and another illustrator I knew had taken the course. So I figured, why not? And it really spoke to me. Yeah. And I was like, this is what I want to do.
Yeah. Yeah. What were some of if you can recall, I know this was a while ago, what did you find especially helpful about that course in particular? Was it the structure they were teaching? Was it the context? Was it the specificity? What really helped you?
For me, it was the amount of people and the community, really, and how much they pushed me. And they pushed me because, I got to see what these people were. It's an online course, so they're talking about it on Facebook and stuff. I got to see their struggles and relate to them, but also there were people of varying degrees in the class. Some were extremely proficient, and it pushed me to do better. And it also made me look at the things that I had been taking for granted in my own work, things that I could work on, but I didn't realize I could work on yet. So yeah, it really made me push myself.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And for you, was the next step then putting together your portfolio and seeking an agent? Did the agent find you once you put up an Instagram or a Behance or something like that? What was your process for that?
So my process is a little bit different than most people. I jumped in with both feet. After the course, I put together my portfolio, and I went to the Children's Book Fair in Bologna to show it to as many people as I could and get feedback. And it was very promising. Some people were like, this is not for me, but a lot of people responded really well to it, which made me think, okay, I can keep going with this. And the next year, actually, it wasn't that long after that I entered competition to find my agent, which is the weird part, because most people don't have to go through a competition against 1,000 other people to get their agent, but this is the way she does it. She's a good agent, so I figured, why not try? And it worked out for me.
Nice. And we're definitely gonna talk a little bit about what that competition was and what that process was like. But I do want to know, because I get a lot of questions from illustrators who are interested in entering the field, how do you put together the pieces? How do you select the pieces for your portfolio? What was your process? Because they find that they have so much work varying over so many years, and to boil it down is just a challenge in and of itself. So how did you pick the pieces?
Well, with Kidlit specifically, what publishers and what agents are looking for is a little bit different than your normal portfolio. What they're looking for is many pieces that focus on the same thing, or in clusters. So instead of having 10 to 20 different pieces, you'll have a few pieces on one story, a few pieces on one story. So when I went to Bologna, I had 5 different themes and just had a few pieces each on that. And that shows people that you can do what they need to fill a whole book, as opposed to just doing one pretty picture,
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And if you recall, what were those buckets what were those themes?
Well, they were
setting. Facial expressions. What did you focus in on?
Actually, so each one, I'm calling it a theme, but it was a different story, and each one focused on those things. So some of the stories were things I did in class. Some of the stories were things that I'll say, you know, self-directed projects, and I created a character for it, had expressions for it, I had a scene for it. Some I had a book cover for it, some I didn't, but as long as they could see multiple pages dealing with the same, you know, basic idea, they saw that you could create work, like enough work on an idea. And you need to be able to show that you have a character that can translate from page to page and pose to pose. You know?
Got you. So that continuity is really important, not just showing standalones, but the sequence of events that you can capture. And so for all of you out there, Jen just mentioned the Bologna Children's Fair. It's one of the biggest in the world, one of the best in the world out in Italy.
It's the biggest for children's book. For, you know, it's exclusively children's books.
Yeah, and it's phenomenal. So that's definitely something to at least do your research on, see if it's right for you, see if it makes sense, because it really is an incredible, I would say almost all of the major industry is going to be there or have some representatives there in some form or fashion. And so, you know, those closed room situations that we talked about, places like the Bologna Children's Fair, places like the American Library Association annual conference, where you get into these situations where you can literally shake the hand of the editor of this imprint or that house. And those contacts, you know, those 2 or 3 minutes to be able to share what you're passionate about and maybe even some of your work is something that's incredibly hard to get outside of those situations. These people are bombarded with things to do and with inquiries and all of that. So
there's so many people in line for these things that most of what you do there is you wait in line to get a few minutes with a publisher. But you know, when you do it, you learn stuff. But there are pros and cons.
Of course. And so you mentioned a competition to find your agent. I do want to talk about that for a little bit. Do you remember what competition that was? We're going to talk about who your agent is and what house she's with, or if she founded.
It was the Lilla Rogers Global Talent Search, and she's the only agent I know that does it this way. And I don't actually think she's doing it this way anymore. Now she runs the Make Art that sells classes, and now I think she's mostly just focused on picking people from class. But for maybe 7 years off and on, she gave people briefs and saw how they, you know, responded to them, and then, you know, cut a bunch of people and took 50 and said, all right, I'm going to give you a new brief, and then see how they respond, and then take like 5 or 6 more people and give them a brief. And if you make it all the way through, you know, it's just like, you know, I don't know, Great British Bake Off or something for drawing. It's really stressful. It's very stressful.
I can imagine. I imagine those briefs covered a range of different topics and themes and storylines. Is that the case or no?
Yes, and this last time it was very kidlit focused, which in the past they hadn't always been, because she's an illustration licensing agent. She doesn't just do literary stuff. But this year I got lucky because it was the stuff that I was focused on. Right.
That's awesome. And then from there, so, you know, so this is September 2018 when you had your representation, when you got to deal with the writers. Nice. And so from there, from September 2018, how long did it take until you had started your first project, your first assignment?
Well, this is a little crazy. So I said September, but I got the dates a little mixed up. It was, I think I signed my contract in July, but September was when we first had our agency meetup. So I got to go to the agency and meet all the other artists. And it was coming back from that I got a call, I think a couple of days later, with a book offer.
Nice. And with the book offer, because we had the last person we featured on one of these was Robert Trujillo, and he's illustrating with Lee and Low, and he's been doing it for a while too. And he mentioned that there were a lot of scripts that were offered to him through his agent that he didn't feel was right for his style. So he actually had to pass on him, which he was mentioning that his wife thought he was crazy at the time because they needed the money and they had offers on the table, but he was like, this isn't really my style. Have you had that before or since with your projects? Have you had to pass on some things?
I just turned down a 3-book deal, and it was
wow.
really scary and really hard to do, but there were enough things that just didn't work out that I thought I can't commit to a year of this or more, you know.
Right. Yeah. Right. And so within the specifics of that 3-book deal, that's with a publisher to illustrate 3 different projects under their umbrella, or is it for one specific artist that you're going to be attached to? One series. Okay. That was my question. So for one specific series. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. Okay. And so what was your first project? So once you got it a few days after the meetup?
It was this.
Nice.
How shiny.
Nice.
Actually,
and
I have it in 2 languages. I have it in English and English. Because it was translated for UK English, so they actually had to change the spelling of some things.
Yeah.
So this one was with Running Press, and then this one was with Puffin and imprint of Penguin Books UK.
Yeah.
So yeah, I figured I would bring it out because why not?
Please do. Yes.
How much you can see
That's
there.
beautiful. I mean, this is a beautifully illustrated book.
And this is what is known as a list book. And try to find a page that everybody likes. And list books they're almost, I think they're always nonfiction. And oh yeah, everybody loves the otters.
Oh yeah, the otters are great.
Yeah. I love these guys because all the detail. So a list book because it is different science facts about different animals. So, and I love animals and I love science. So there was no way I was turning this down. I was doing a little happy dance. I was on the train. And I got the call. And the author wrote a great book. This is Kate Hosford, and she did a lot of wonderful research about how animals sleep. And it's just filled with poems and lots of fun facts about it. And when I was a kid, I used to read the Dr. Seuss sleep book. That was the book that put me to bed. So when I got this, I was like, oh, it feels like that. It's something that'll really like calm a kid down when it's time to go to bed. And then also take stuff away from it. So very, very happy about it.
No, that's amazing. Congrats on that, because that's a big deal. That's a really, really big deal. And you mentioned the poems on the page. So what was your process for taking those bits of text for this nonfiction work and turning it into a visual? Like, what's your process for doing that?
With this one, it was very straightforward. I think certain books, story-based books, are going to be much more complicated. But with this one, it's the animal sleeping. Show the animal in its natural habitat in a realistic way. I actually, there was a point when, I imbued them with a little bit more personality, I would say, like, they were sleeping, so I had more stylized eyes, and then, they would come back to me and say, we have to draw this more realistic. The eyes don't actually go that way. I'm like, okay. So there wasn't, there wasn't a lot that was challenging about it in terms of how to do it. I just wanted to show the animal in its environment in the nicest, most calming way. Yeah,
that makes sense. And end to end, how long did it take you to complete this book project?
I think it went through from September to maybe it was March when it was finished. Actually, yeah, because I was finishing it right before Bologna, 2019. And that's not because it took that long necessarily. It's just there's back and forth with, getting it proved, getting it fact checked. There's a lot of fact checking in nonfiction. So things do tend to slow down sometimes for that. So sometimes there's some hurry up and wait.
Yeah, no, I bet. And what's that approval process like for you as an illustrator? Do you first send over your black and whites? Do you do everything in full color from the get-go? So what iterations do you send over to your publisher?
So for this one, it was line art first. Actually, this one went from line art approved straight to color, because I had done a sample issue or a sample illustration, and the sample was enough for them to get the idea and the color palette. So they're like, okay, you can run with this. For other ones, I've sent over pagination, which is my vision of how a story might break down for a manuscript, which is when things get more complicated. And then they've asked me for color roughs, which take a lot longer than black and white roughs because you're working out all the color. But then on the end, the actual illustrations take less time because you've already worked out all the color. Right. And then I've done black and white. I've done line drawings, black and white. It all depends on the publisher, really.
Yeah, that makes sense.
As an artist, you have a lot of control. You can say, this is how I work, and a lot of publishers respect that.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. And how did you pick the color theme for this story? I mean, I know it's a nighttime kind of sleepy story.
It needed nighttime, and a lot of these animals sleep during the day. So I needed something that felt very muted and calming, but also allowed for daytime scenes.
Yeah.
I just kind of hack away at a palette until it works for me. I usually find, because like this one you see like lighting and stuff, and I really like to play with light. And if you do play with light, I find almost any color palette you put together works because light will change it. If that makes any sense. Because, you know, if it's too dark, the golden sunlight will, you know, wake it up a bit. Or if it's too bright, you know, your shadows will soften it and cool it down a bit. So.
And going back to your agent for a bit, are they only bringing you projects within the children's book realm space? Or are they bringing you some like editorial? Or are they bringing you some corporate clients? Is it
I do editorial.
Range? Nice.
It's very much based on what I give them. They are not going to be able to sell me to a client on a type of thing that I've never done before.
Right.
I mean, sometimes a client will see my picture book work and say, oh, let's get her for this editorial piece, and that has happened. But my editorial work has been very in line with my kidlit work.
Yeah. No, that makes a ton of sense. That makes a ton of sense. I just because I'm curious, how many author copies did you get from the publisher when the book went?
25 of the UK and of the US, and 2 of the UK.
25 is going to be my guess. And just so everybody here is on the same page, with your agent agreement, I know with a lot of friends of mine, a lot of people in the business, it's usually one of those things where, at least in their case, where you more so just have to give notice that you may be going a separate way if things don't work out, as opposed to it being a term deal, like you're locked in for 3 years. It's more so like you can transition at any given time as long as one party or the other communicates that. Is that the same for you? Is it more so just like you would just have to give notice if you wanted to?
It's the same. You give notice, but anything that has been contracted out already still is, you know, the licensing is still through the agent. So however many years that was contracted, that's still set. And then I think with my agent, she has the rights to work with me through 6 months. So it's sort of like a 6 months runway before we're cut.
Great spirit. Got you. That makes sense. And we talked about this a little bit behind the scenes, but in terms of what you can mention about upcoming projects, just tell us what you got on the pipeline, or even macro themes, you know, just what it's about or whatever.
Well, I have something that is that I'm very excited about that I can't talk about, that
yep.
isn't contracted yet. So, you know, it's not a bird in the hand, but it's something that my publisher, on something that I'll talk about in a minute, we work together, and he's got another thing lined up for me that I'm really hoping comes through. I should get something about it this month. And then right now I'm working on a piece for a French publisher, but it's a holiday piece. I think I can say that. That's about it.
No, that makes sense. So two potentials, or one for sure, and then one potential in the
Mhm,
pipeline.
mhm.
Nice. How have you
Yeah.
found for you in your work the industry's been impacted with everything that's going on in the world, health wise?
I understand that things have slowed down. I
Mm-hmm.
have not slowed down. I
Mm-hmm.
had intended to take a little bit of time off because my last year was extremely busy. I worked
Mm-hmm.
on 3 books last year, 2 of which are
Oh,
coming out this fall.
wow.
And in addition to like some other smaller things. And I really wanted to work on my own stuff. So I thought, okay, well, my last book project is done in February. I'm going to take a couple of months off. And then all of this happened. And I got too scared to take any time off. So I had a couple of editorial covers come my way, and then this thing for the French publisher, and another thing that I'm forgetting now. So I've been pretty busy
Yeah.
despite the slowdown.
No, that, I mean, that totally makes sense for you, especially on the services side, on the creative side. I've definitely seen a tremendous uptick on my end as well, just in terms of editorial services and things like that for children's books and art direction and stuff. It's a lot of
It's
people I
such
feel
a
like are,
stable industry because it
yeah.
moves so slowly. It's like the ship. It's not gonna, you know, you can throw the anchor in the water, but it's still gonna keep going for a while.
Which actually reminds me of a question too. What was the timeline for when you completed the book, your first book, the book you just showed us in March, and when it actually hit the shelf?
This was fast. I think it was around, it was just under a year
Oh, wow.
from
That's
start to
really
finish.
good.
That's really fast.
That's good.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Because these timelines can be up to 2 years in a lot of cases, or
Mhm.
24 months after the book's already in the can. And so,
Yeah.
and
My other two
so
are about a year and a half, but yeah.
yeah. Nah, that makes total sense. And I do want to ask you, so we're going to open it up probably in about 5 minutes for the questions that are in the chat. For those of you who are just joining us, if you have a question, please type it in the chat, and then I'll either read it out loud, or I'll just go ahead and unmute you from my end so that you can speak directly. And that's kind of how we're going to handle the whole Q&A process. We're going to get there in a few minutes. But I did want to ask you, what's your dream situation, Jen? Like down the line, would you like to have an agency or a house where you're employing other illustrators? Would you like to just illustrate into the sunset?
I don't know yet.
Okay.
There's the entrepreneurial part of me thinks, yeah, you know, I have my own agency, sure, but I also am really happy with my agency, and that's a lot of work that I may not want to do, like ever, because
Right.
the work is very different. My current dream is author illustrator. I'm trying to write every day to work on my own projects, and I'd like to do a series and probably a bit more middle grade and graphic
Ooh.
novel stuff, because that's I went to school for I went to school for video, but minored in sequential arts, aka storyboarding and comic book illustration. I love that stuff. So
Yeah.
but
No,
it's
that's
a lot of
awesome.
work.
Yeah, it's those panels are no joke.
Mm-hmm.
I'm learning that too, is where we've been sort of storyboarding and game planning our first graphic novel,
Oh
and
yeah.
I'm learning just how different it is from
Mm-hmm.
picture books.
Yeah.
So
It's a
it's a
labor of
whole
love.
new. It is. It is. But when they come out right there, they're so beautiful, and it's such an engaging way to read. I actually guiltily just read one of my first graphic novels about a few weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
And it was phenomenal. It's called Dragon Hoops. It should be hitting the shelves relatively soon if it's not out already. And one of my old art teachers in high school is Jean Lewin Yang, who's now doing the Superman comics. He's over Superman for
Oh
DC. He's doing
wow.
Avatar.
Awesome.
He's and some other things. And so he did a graphic novel about our high school basketball team, and it was really, really good. It was a deep story.
That's so cool.
Yeah. And so yeah, speaking on that theme, the last question is, are there any stories in particular that you're passionate about illustrating? I mean, I know you mentioned the graphic novel medium,
Mm-hmm.
but are there any stories that you're just like, man, if I get a chance to do a revamp of Where the Wild Things Are, I'm taking it,
Oh
you
God.
know?
Oh,
Right.
I don't know. I have my own story sort of mulling over. I'm always thinking of things, and I I like things that are a bit fantastical, but I also like things that are rooted in, I don't know, truth. I don't know if that makes any sense. I just like things that are very believable and sort of scientifically approached, but I still like magic. So
Yeah. Nice. All right, so now we're gonna open this up, and in the interest of time, I'll probably just read these off for now. So Misha asked, how do you learn how to draw different expressions and poses?
well, there's a lot of resources online that show you like ways in which you can move the eyes, like raise or lower the mouth, raise or lower the brow. But the best thing you can do is just draw a bunch of eyes, draw a bunch of noses, draw a bunch of mouths, and look at yourself in the mirror while you draw.
Huh, look at yourself in the mirror while you draw.
Yeah, just park a little mirror right there and just make that, excuse me, just make the face that you want to do, and then just try and draw it.
Yeah, no, that makes that makes perfect sense. Rev asks, I'm writing and illustrating my first book. The characters are specifically Filipino American. How does one look for a publisher with a specific story, or how do I promote a book that deals with a specific culture?
Well, right now, the publishing industry at large is waking up and realizing how many books it has about little white kids. Mm-hmm. So if you have a different story, if you can, they're looking for representation. They're looking to change this. They're looking to speak to more kids because there are a lot more kids out there. So if you have something like that, you could really pitch it to just about anybody. But I would look for a publisher that you like that does something that's not exactly the same, but is kind of similar. Mm-hmm. And then figure out what their submission process is.
Yeah, no, that's really good advice. And there's even an imprint, Rev, that I can recommend to you that does focus specifically on stories from that culture. And so, just as Jen is saying, people are getting really hyper specific about the niches and the different categories that they're looking to serve. And so it's definitely the best time traditionally to be having different kinds of stories within the children's book realm, because they are waking up to realize, like Jen said, about just how unidimensional for a large part they've been in the past with one culture and then animals. And that's pretty much been 90% of the landscape. And so now they're aware, and they see opportunity, not only creatively, but financially, of course, to serve underserved audiences. Mm-hmm. And so that's a big part of it. Cool. So Iliad asks, let me see. It's hard to tell on this screen, but what are your preferred color mediums as an illustrator, Jen?
Oh, that's something I struggle with. I like all colors. Like I was saying before, I'm much more interested in light and shadow than I am about any particular color. And I think that I have a style that I can't necessarily pinpoint as well as other people who see my work can. But when I look at my Instagram, for instance, I'm just like, oh, this doesn't match at all. But it's almost all like light and shadow focused. So
yeah. No, that makes sense. That makes sense. And then Misha asked, when you're posting your art online or in an online portfolio, how do you protect your image from plagiarism? How do you stop people from stealing your stuff? Or at least protect your stuff? You can't necessarily stop them.
Sign it is number one. And this is something that I have a lot of complicated feelings about, but basically share your work. Don't worry about theft. Stuff is going to get stolen and there's nothing you can do about it. But you can't hide, because none of the good stuff is going to come if you don't share it. If you get really successful and you have 100,000 followers, your stuff's going to get stolen. I have friends who get DM'd almost daily about some use of their work that was completely unlicensed, and it's heartbreaking and frustrating. But if she didn't do it, she wouldn't get book deals. She wouldn't get she wouldn't be able to work with fashion designers. You just gotta do it. It's like I've heard it compared to when company opens up a shop, like a store, they know that they're going to lose some of their merchandise through shoplifting. Like it's par for the course, unfortunately.
Yeah, the risk and reward is all tied in.
You can put copyrights on there, but you don't want your copyright to interfere with the art, because then the people who actually want to buy your art aren't going to be able to see it in all its glory, and they're going to pass. They're going to go to somebody else. Right.
No, that's really good advice. Makes a lot of sense too. Jess Monroe asked a really good question. I'm so glad that Jess did, because this is something that I definitely want to harp on. How do you determine your prices? If you worked on 3 books last year, how much did you charge per book? Do you take on other jobs in addition to the books each year? And so, just trying to figure out a living in the industry. How do you price your services?
I'm fortunate that my agent does it. I don't have a lot of control over it. Unfortunately, I mean, I have the ability to say no.
Right.
But you're going to hit against different things based on where your publisher is and what kind of publisher they are, what kind of book it is, how many pages it is. And let's see, like, I'm wondering how specific I can be. But I will say that my range has thus far, my advances have been 16 to 20,000 per book, with royalties on top of that.
Of course.
And that is U.S. publishers. U.S. publishers pay more than international publishers. This is why when I was talking about Bologna, I said there are pros and cons. You're going to get a lot of feedback, but a lot of the connections you make will be international publishers that don't pay as much. So it's all a careful dance.
And what are you finding it inspires another question. What are you finding are your normal royalty rates right now, with the deals that you've seen? What's the
around
kickback?
5 or 6%.
Okay.
Some, depending on what it is, some less, but about that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Marlon asked the question, usually when you're working on illustrations, the screen color and the actual ink on paper is a little bit different. What you do on the screen and how it gets printed is a little bit different. How do you find that publishers mitigate that? How do they make sure that what's digital actually translates properly with the color codes into what you see on the paper?
And I wish I had my proofs here, but a lot of publishers, not all, will take the art to the actual printer and get proofs and then send them to you to look at. So my last publisher just sent me the proofs. Like, I think I got them last month. It was recent enough that I wanted them to be in quarantine before I opened them up. Yeah, and then I looked at it and it looked great. And I said, this picture looks a little dark, or this one does, and they're like, okay, and that's it. I think if you are working in RGB and you're not very familiar with how inks will change a thing, then you're going to be a lot more surprised. But I've been working in printing for so long that I kind of know what to expect.
Yeah, no, that makes sense because of your background and where you're coming from. Maria had a really good question. She says, any tips for an old school illustrator to learn digital drawing? It seems so different and I don't want to lose my own style.
Well, I think style comes through no matter what. Style is just like, to me, it's your voice. It's the colors you use, the shapes you use. It's the, anything that you're passionate about. You can look at, oh gosh, who is the artist now? I wanted to say Hopper, but it's not Hopper. Somebody else can maybe tell me, but there's a real famous painter who just works exclusively on iPad now, and it's still him, even though he went digital. You can learn everything online. There's so many tutorials, so just hack away at it, go through YouTubes and, just practice. I have a lot of friends that have transitioned digital and kept their process pretty similar. Like they'll open up a canvas and just draw and erase and draw and erase and draw and erase. And then you have me, where I've been using digital stuff for so long that I have like as many layers as the program will let me have, and I'm using
Right.
clipping masks and all this stuff. So you can do that. You can take advantage of that if you want to, but you don't need to. And a lot of illustrators don't.
Yeah, that makes sense. Tar wanted to know, what programs do you use to create your pieces? What are you working in?
Right now I'm working in Procreate almost exclusively, because I just find the drawing on iPad so fluid and easy. This was all Procreate.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. What are some of your favorite places you like to draw, and what times of day? Are you all times of day? Are you a morning person? Do you really do best at night?
Usually if I go out to draw, it's during the day. Not exclusively, but it's just because I want to go get outside. And I mostly draw when I travel. When I'm fortunate enough to travel, I always take a really tiny sketchbook and a really tiny palette, and I just try to find some downtime to sketch the environment around me. And I'll go to Dolores Park or something and do that here, or maybe get a sketch meetup with some friends at a cafe and do that. But since I started actually working in the industry, I do it a lot less.
Yeah. I can see that for sure. Deborah wanted to know, when did you feel you were ready to start showing your work to publishers? I mean, I know you touched on that a little bit, but can you expand on just what gave you the confidence just to like go straight from the class to just, I'm gonna go to Bologna and I'm gonna go to Italy and just show people my stuff?
Well, I took the class on a whim, and I went to Italy on a whim. I'm kind of spontaneous that way, but I don't know, maybe it's just experience. I hired illustrators before, so I knew, like, I kind of had a feeling about where I stood with regards to professional work. I had a lot to learn. Like when I came back from Bologna that first time, I redid almost my entire portfolio. I actually took images and just drew over them. I tightened them up a lot. So I don't think it's never too early to get your work in front of people. It's never too early to start building your audience, because your audience is going to help you create opportunities for yourself. And it's never too early to start getting feedback. So just kind of assume that you're ready, and then people will start noticing when they agree with you.
Right. I think that's great advice. There's really, in a vacuum, it's going to be nearly impossible for you to really know how your work resonates with the audience. You kind of have to put your best foot forward. And that's not to say, not to be thoughtful or intentional, but if you just want to throw something out there, I think that's fine too. But I think the purpose is to just have something in front of people so you can start getting feedback, which is the macro purpose of this entire group, is that we have sounding boards and we have people who are getting resources about competitions and awards and tips and advice and business and creative. And we can all bring that back to the whole. It's kind of like a potluck, so that we all learn from it, because any one of us is only going to have so much exposure to the industry. I mean, for those of you who were fortunate enough to join us for Rob's experience, and now Jen's, you can even see just on the Illustrator side, within one industry, there can still be so many different journeys and so many different facets to consider along the way. And so it really is varied. It really is varied. Diamond wanted to ask, are there any suggestions for a 6-year-old as far as drawing, using an app or sticking with pen and pencil? What do you suggest for a young person who just really loves to draw and create?
Oh, I think they should use whatever they're excited about. I'm a big fan of following the inspiration. So if there's an app that they enjoy, let them do the app. If they want to use pen and paper, let them do pen and paper. I mean, I don't think you can go wrong at all.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. And so for our last two, Reb wanted to know, he's been thinking about copywriting his characters. Does this really protect your art? Is it worth it to copyright your characters? What do you think?
If you're going to, well, this is complicated, and I'm no lawyer, so I can't give any legal advice. It's US law that it's already copyright written. If you put it down, or well, anything you write is copywritten when you put it down. Trademarking is a different thing. You're talking about trademarking your characters, I think. And that is very expensive. I think you can hire a trademark attorney to do that for like $10,000. Mm-hmm. Like if you are going to build a business around this, then yeah, why not? But if you are just, if you're worried about trademarking before showing them to a publisher, I probably would not do that. Mm-hmm. Not to say that there aren't publishers out there who might steal your work or something, but for the most part, that's not what they're trying to do. They want, if they like it, they're going to want to, hire you to keep doing that rather than like it and then go take it to somebody else,
Right.
I don't know if that answered your question.
No, I think that's on the nose, because I do think the price factor, especially for artists at various places, you really do have to ask, is the juice worth the squeeze? If I'm going to be paying out all of this money to make sure this work is trademarked, and it's not even picked up yet for something, like sort of, you could just be digging yourself into a hole before you've actually had some monetary value come from your art. And that's not the direction that we want to be going in as artists. So the very last question, I think, is an excellent question to sort of cap this on. Gloria asked, if you could no longer work in the picture book industry, what other industry would you choose to work in? I'm not sure that there is one, at least not in arts. Like, I would want to work in the arts probably. When I was younger, it was either go to art school or go to school for physics. So part of me sometimes is like, oh, I just want to go learn physics. It's never too late.
Right, yeah. I'm like, do I really want to invest the time and money into learning it?
Right.
But I think there are a lot of different creative fields that appeal to me, but two-dimensional drawing is pretty much where I live right now. It took me a while to get happy with that because I wanted to do everything when I was younger, and but there's so much variety, I think, for me in two-dimensional illustration that I'm okay with this for a while, maybe forever.
Yeah, I think there's a ton of room in the way the medium is expanding. I think people are starting to take more risks visually, creatively, even with the type of stories that they're telling. I mean, just the success of certain books and certain themes lately is something that even 7 years ago in the children's book space, it would have been difficult to see it getting that much traction. And it's awesome to see that today this type of stuff is even being published by houses, Oh
yeah.
It's really cool.
I know we're gonna to motor soon, but I pulled out some stuff. Like, this is a book that I got in Bologna my first year, illustrated by Tiziano Romanin, which is just a really beautiful book. But this book is about Franz Kafka.
Oh.
And then this book by one of my favorite illustrators, Felicita Sala, is about a poem by Pablo Neruda. Like, there are very sophisticated kids books out there now, and I think it's important to know that there's a spot for your idea. Like, you can do all kinds of things and find it if if the writing is good and the illustration is good and you connect with the right publisher. It doesn't have to be cookie cutter kids book anymore. It can be weird and wonderful.
That's so refreshing. So refreshing to hear. So where can people find your work? Where can they buy your books? Where can they and where can they follow you on social and online?
Most of the stuff I do is on Instagram, and it's Jennifer M. Potter. All one word. The M has to be there because there are way too many Jennifer Potters in this world.
Nice. And what about buying your work? Where can people get your books?
I've got links in my bio for my or I guess I could send my website is also jennifermpotter.com. But I have links in my bio to my current book, Songbird Dreams of Singing, that I showed you, and then the 2 ones that are available for pre-order now. Nice.
Well, that's really, really exciting. Are there any parting words you want to share with the group before we wrap?
I guess the thing that I try to take with me is that, a lot of what is required is luck, and but you can influence luck. You can make your own luck by working hard and building your community. The more people that you have in your network, the more opportunities there are for opportunity. So what you want to do is you want to build that opportunity, and then also just keep, chugging away and making sure that you have the skill to meet it when it comes.
Yeah, no, I think that's perfect advice. Yeah, and so in alignment with, there's the creative aspect of children's books, and then there's the business aspect, and I never want to leave one out because they really are hand in hand. You need to
Absolutely.
develop your craft. You need to get better at what it is you care to do. You need to know your audience. You need to be reading children's books as much as you can. But also you need to understand how contracts work, how people found their agent, how, what royalties look like. If you want to make a career out of this and you want to, pay your bills and feed your family, then you need to know the numbers too. And so we're really passionate about sharing both sides of the industry. And Jen, I can't thank you enough for taking this time.
Thanks for having me.
No, of course. And I did record this session, so I'll go ahead and send it to you. And if you're okay, I'll also send it to the people who had a chance to join, just so they can learn from it again and again.
All right. Sounds good.
All right. Well, you have a good one.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. See you guys.